I guess the point, if there is one in all of that, is that your connection to other creative people and just sharing your passion about the idea that you've got and hearing them reflect back to you, like what's cool about it to them, that is the stuff, man. And even if, I'd like to think that even if I had never worked on anything that anyone gave a shit about, like if I had that, I would keep going.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Game Loop. I'm joined today by Harvey Smith. If you're a fan of the podcast and a fan of this channel, you probably know who he is. You probably know what he's worked on, but I'm going to go ahead and let him tell you some of the games that he's known for.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem.
If this seems odd, in reflection, we're doing the intro for like the third time.
Yes.
And this is the second day, so I'm wearing a different T-shirt and stuff.
Yeah, somehow I did not work on BioShock 2, by the way.
Okay.
This happens every time I talk to anyone about anything, is that game credits are very hard.
Thank you for the intro, and I'm Harvey Smith. I have been making games this December 33 years. I started out in QA at Origin Systems on System Shock, and I was just a support guy for 10 months on the QA team, working with Looking Glass Technologies. I love this game. This is the game I cut my teeth on. I learned so much. It was like boot camp for me. And the reason I'm holding that steel case is because Night Dive Studios, Stephen Kick and company, they redid. You should talk to him.
That would be amazing.
They redid, System Shock, and they sent me a copy, and I'm looking forward to like diving into it at some point. I'm always years late on games, but I've worked on a bunch of games, and it's funny because it seems like a bunch of games to me, but like if you talk to any old school people who worked on games prior to the '90s, when games
Mhm.
took like 6 months to make, I guess, or whatever, their list of credits is like 100 long or something. You go look at
Lord.
John Romero's credits; it's like crazy. My list is like not super long, but I worked on the original Deus Ex and sequel to that, Invisible War. I worked for 9 years with Warren Spector. It was a great experience mostly. And I see Warren every now and then, but he was another guy I learned a ton from. Um, I started at Origin where Richard Garriott worked and Chris Roberts and Warren Spector and guys like that. But really, it was like Looking Glass Technologies was kind of like the third party group in Boston that like was like the magic for me, right? The kind of games they made. And I've talked about that, I think, yesterday with you, but Underworld Thief, System Shock, there's just like that run of games is like incredible. People forget Terra Nova, but I love Terra Nova too. But anyway, for the games I worked on, it was like really the things you'd know, like, I did work on an Ultima briefly. I supported System Shock. I worked on a game called Cyber Mage, with David W. Bradley. I I worked on a game called Fire Team, which was like one of the first games with voice. Long before
Oh,
Xbox
cool.
did it, we shipped a headset and we were experimenting with like, what is it like when people start talking in the middle of the game? And it was so illuminating. I had moved to Silicon Valley. I lived in San Mateo, or Pacifica actually, and worked in San
Uh-huh.
Mateo. Pacifica is home of the world's most beautiful Taco Bell and a bunch of mudslides while I was there. But
Wow.
but it was just like a little squad game, and it's just so funny how everything is just taken for granted now, but like so many things have happened over the course of the last 33 years. Like when we finally turned on the voice for our beta testers, it was immediately obvious that some of the people with crazy names like Fire Truck 76 or whatever, was like a 10-year-old boy, and like holy shit. And then like this other person was a lady living in Canada who was 30, and like why are you in our beta test? Because it sounds like you work in a medical field and you must be incredibly busy, but this is how she chilled after work or whatever. And it
Yeah.
was just like, all right, cool. And broadband was an issue, and like you know, suddenly everybody treated like certain people differently because they could tell they were younger or older or male or female. And it was just like,
Mhm.
wow, we have a lot to deal with. We have a lot of problems to solve.
Yeah.
But that was a super fun project with Art Min and Ned Lerner, and I learned a lot from them. I moved back to Austin. I worked on Deus Ex 1 and 2. I did this all out of order, didn't I? Uh,
That's all right.
I worked on some games that did not do well. I worked on a game called Black Site. That was an Area 51 property Midway wanted us to do. They shipped it a little bit early. I worked on Dishonored 1 and 2 with Rafael Colantonio. Of those 33 years, I spent 16 of those years at Arcane. So it was just like an incredible run for me. I never expected to be at Arcane that long, and met some amazing people. The people in France, Lyon, and the people in Austin that worked at Arcane were lifelong friends, many of us. And I just learned so much, and we had such a good time. Dishonored 1 and 2 are two of the games I'm proudest of, along with the Deus Ex games, of course.
Mhm.
And then at some point, we got caught up in the everybody wants a games as service game trend, like everybody or a lot of people. And we worked on
Mhm.
Redfall, which was like
a harrowing experience.
we went through COVID together and the Great Resignation, and the game needed a team double the size probably, and it just like did not launch well, and lots
Yeah.
of regrets there. But at the same time, supporting people through COVID and really, really trying times, keeping a studio going and like shipping something.
No, I mean, there's a lot of fun to be had in Redfall. I've played it post-launch after they patched the whatever with
Yeah.
the single player patch or whatever, and
Well,
I
it was
thought it was
crazy
really
because
cool.
we we did like several major patches to try to get it to where we thought it should be at launch date. We really
Uh-huh.
should have launched with this. I think it was 1.4 or whatever it was, and the team just gave it their all. And we
Mhm.
did like three big patches fixing like thousands of bugs, and like the last one, I think our studio got shut down literally before we finished the patch, but we had put months of work into it. So we went into a full court press effort with Microsoft, just saying, let us release this patch, even though the studio shut down. And so we had to sign papers so that some people could come back in the building, and we worked on the patch, and we
Oh,
literally shipped
wow.
the patch after the game was after the game or after the company was shut down. So it's just like
Yeah.
crazy. And of course, the Leon guys, the Arcane Leon guys, are still going, and hopefully, knock on wood, that they're going to ship their game, Blade. I guess I'm
Yeah.
very big fan of Dinga and Sebastian Maton and all those guys, and they're just so talented, and I want to play that game. So,
I know.
but it's a turbulent time for the industry, and I don't pull back from talking about that. I've made huge mistakes, but I've also had amazing moments where people still talk about the game 10 or 20 years later. So I love what we do, and I love talking to people who love games. My conversations with you, you're working on an indie game about a very old school,
Yeah.
a high school, and you did all this historical research into it. And we talked about different ways you could manifest the gameplay, what the game could be about, and but the love that you put into talking about the art and the history of the place.
Mhm.
That's like a meaningful moment. It's why I'm here talking to you today, because that was a real moment. I was like, oh, cool, this is interesting. We talked about it a couple of
Yeah.
times, but
That's part of what attracted me to starting this podcast, and I started it back after I talked to you originally. We talked
okay.
for a while, and then I think
I
you had said
apologize
something.
for putting you on this path.
No, no, I'm happy about it. It's been very rewarding. But you said something like, "Oh, you should record or you should post this video, and it might help, get some traction." I went back to look at the footage, and all of the audio was like missing. There's no audio whatsoever. So, but after that, I was
Uh,
like, you know what? I should probably, make an actual effort at talking to people that know how to make games and get their perspective.
I often speak from the perspective of somebody who makes immersive sims, which are part first person shooter, part role playing game, and really part adventure game, part exploration
Hmm.
game, generally
Yeah.
single player. Find your own path, play creatively. That's very much what I love. And as a result, I've slowed in the amount of games I play. I'm playing a mobile game right now, and periodically I fire up the PlayStation or the Switch.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the new Steam machine, even though it's it's priced in a way that some people were shocked, and I was like, I kind of
I
expected
expected it.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was like, how do you put together basically what is like a PC with, some custom stuff that should make it nicer to use on your couch, along
Yeah.
with a high-end controller and all of this stuff? How do you put that together for less than $800, And then
I know.
of course everybody is gaga for the we're going to eventually call the AI bubble. We
Uh-huh.
had to go through crypto and NFT games, and now we have to go through the AI bubble where next year two people are going to sit down alone and make GTA 7. Like, sure they are.
Yeah.
Sure they are. Just you and your prompt commander, Mr. Executive, are going to sit down and just going to make billions of dollars. Just,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Everybody's
good
gonna
luck.
love your game too.
Yeah, right.
It's
But,
not gonna have any problems or flaws.
right. And if there are, you'll be able to go through that code and like find the bugs, the traditional way, like that the
Right.
AI wrote for you, like I'm sure. But anyway, chips are and RAM and everything is hard to get right now, and so the price of everything is gone up. If you just order a laptop for someone on your team, it's like, wow, my God, it's so expensive. 1 year
Hmm.
ago, it was much less money. Now it's pretty expensive. So
Yeah.
um, it's a crazy time to be making games, and I don't know what games look like on the other side of this, but I know that the demand for you know those experiences that transport you, that let you forget about your woes for a while, that let you dig into a different problem, that's not going away, just like books aren't going away or movies aren't going away.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
world seems sometimes so dystopic, like people write articles like, do people even date anymore? Does anyone want to fall in love anymore? And it's like, yes, of course people want. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
it's like writing an article. Are people going to eat food in the future? Yeah, yeah, we're going to eat food, man. It's
It's
okay.
gonna be the
Chill the fuck out.
Jetsons.
Yeah,
These
right.
little
Take
like
your protein
pills.
pills. Yeah.
The goal that I set out to accomplish with this podcast was to kind of shed light on the individual processes of different roles within the
Mm.
pipeline, and so you, I guess, would be representing the director designer role, and speaking to your process on that level.
Rafael Colantonio and I did a series of videos recently that are like 7 parts or something on looking back on Dishonored because Raf hasn't played Dishonored since we released it, which was funny to me. I didn't know that. I know him really
Yeah.
well. We hang out all the time. Anyway, we did that series and it was strangely touching because some of those people I haven't talked to in a while, but it was just funny to me that Raf didn't even play the release version, he said. He played it a lot, obviously, during development,
Yeah.
but then hasn't looked at it in the intervening 14 years or something. But anyway, the only reason I brought that up is that he is a musician and he has like a setup at home that
Uh-huh.
sounds really good, like yours, your mic and your all that stuff. It sounds really good, like almost, like you do this regularly, of course. And I always feel like my lighting makes me look pink, and like the sound is not always great, and sometimes the camera switches from one to the other. So I'm always
Yeah.
just impressed with people's setup, like when the lighting
Yeah.
is good and when the sound is good and all that. So
Yeah, well, oddly enough, I'm actually just using my iPhone as a camera, so
oh wow.
it's just my hack to make it
Okay.
look like I have a professional situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've actually
What a
followed
light.
along. I've followed along with all. Oh, you have a light there.
Yeah. Maybe less pink now, but
Yeah, that's cool. Um, yeah, I've actually been watching every episode as they drop on the Dishonored playthrough, and it's been awesome. There are a few things that kind of relate to what I wanted to talk to you about today. So it's cool that I have some recent memories of things that you've said that kind of we
hmm
could talk about. But one of the things that I thought was really funny is how you keep interjecting how odd it is that the world could come to this.
There was a huge focus on fascism and authoritarianism at the
Yeah,
beginning of
it
the
looks.
project.
Yeah,
And that was hard to get right too, because you don't want things to look overtly.
like Nazism.
Yeah, right. But like at the same time, these patterns repeat themselves over and over, as we see in current politics.
Yeah, like
Um,
obviously no one would fall for propaganda or a tyrant or like this guy should be given the Supreme Court should literally rule that this guy doesn't have to follow the law. It's just like, okay, I thought one of the number one rules of the presidency was you couldn't profit on the office, and this guy's selling fucking hats and crypto and
uh,
anyway, yeah, it's there when you work in thematic subject matter, like Deus Ex was all about like conspiracy theory and stuff back when that
mhm.
seemed almost quaint or kind of pleasant. Oh, these cranks out there, a guy turns
Yeah.
50 and he suddenly believes we didn't land on the moon, or that other political parties controlling the weather somehow.
Uh,
Um, and that, oh, there may be a plan someday to use FEMA because they have emergency powers in the case of a terrible plague or whatever to actually just take over the government, take over the
uh,
country and suspend due process. And you work on that kind of subject matter, or Dishonored is thematically at a deep level. It's all about the abuse of power. When you have
right.
power over another person, what do you do? Do you restrain yourself, or do you go hog wild? As a guard or an aristocrat or the ruler, or just a man with a knife, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
And when you see some of those things, like, man, the reason these are concepts, the reason these resonate with people is that they happen through history all the time. They can happen anywhere, and
Hmm.
populism, if you talk about the elites, you make up some nebulous like threatening force like immigrants, or blaming trans people, or the elites, the vague elites, whatever that means to you. You can get people angry about their lives or afraid that someone's going to take something away from them. And once they're afraid, you can tell them, well, I can help you with this. I'm the one that can help you with this. And then they'll
Hmm.
basically apparently do whatever you want.
Attention,
So
Dunwall citizens.
Yeah.
a lot of the
This is
stuff
a
we did with
special
the Lord
announcement
Regent and
from
this
our honorable
propaganda and the
Lord
street
Regent.
speakers.
This is the Lord Regent speaking. It is with regret that I announce that my term as Lord Regent has been extended through the month of harvest and potentially beyond.
And the
In addition,
draconian guard policies, and the fear of disease, and all of these things, like controlling information, which obviously the internet, social media specifically, has been a very powerful force, in some cases good, and some in many cases bad. And now AI,
Hmm.
like I remember there was a change made to one of the AIs, I think it was Grok, where it was like, if you ask the average AI what was Gamergate, it was like, well, it was a right wing push to control the narrative, or to get rid of woke games, or whatever, however you want to put it, right? But like,
Hmm.
I think Grok will literally tell you it's about ethics and journalism, which was like
Huh.
the cover story, for the people that were. And obviously, Gamergate was, now we know, was not a grassroots effort. It was like machination.
Hmm.
Um, but like the fact that somebody could tell the AI, here's your guardrails, this is your take on history. And if
Hmm.
everybody in the world starts going to AI the way they go to Google in the past, to say
Right.
like, "Oh, tell me what happened in World War II," and like, depending on what your AI is trained on, that becomes the matter of record. And it used to be like, well, the encyclopedias probably have that, or the textbooks. But like when a
Hmm.
smaller and smaller group of people with an agenda control the encyclopedia, although
Or
those same forces are going after Wikipedia, because it's still like the only
yeah.
unpurchased, body of knowledge that's at least semi-democratic or whatever. But anyway, it's just like crazy times we live in, and the games ought to reflect what's going on in your world.
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot lately, like, is our reality stranger than the fictions that we we create to try
Yeah.
and comment on them, or
Dude,
is
it's
it?
no joke, but because it's terrible and it's tragic. But like, there was a screenshot someone posted the other day from some movie. I don't remember the movie, but it was a science fiction movie that looked in the future, and and it had a map of France and a weather guy pointing to the different states in France or the different regions. And all the
Hmm.
temperatures in Celsius were just like super fucking high. The whole map was red. And it was
Yeah.
a movie about climate change. And it was like, and then they like took a screenshot of the actual news this week with an actual weather person. And the temperatures in the today, this week, exceeded the temperatures that were made up for the science fiction film that was like trying to be alarmist about climate change.
Yeah.
Like the reality is worse than,
Yeah.
and there are people there with no AC, and it's just like,
It's brutal.
yeah, you can't, a society can't function when people are dying in their apartments, or all you can think about is getting cooled off, or, like
Hmm.
machines are breaking down because everything's too hot, like tires are melting on the road or whatever, and it's like, just it doesn't take an absolute collapse to wipe everything out. I think it just takes enough friction where people are just like, you know what, this is no longer tenable,
Yeah.
for the breakdown to start happening. But hey, we got to get on that, and the world
Yeah.
is right, like, sustainable stuff keeps making huge progress. And if only we didn't have a mad king who's trying everything they can to bring back coal or whatever, it's just like, it's so nuts, man. Like,
Yeah.
whose interest does this serve besides the tiny number of people that own coal plants? I mean,
I
not
don't know.
mine.
I
Yeah.
know.
Anyway, not
Not
to get
mine either.
political. Ha
No,
ha
it's
ha.
okay.
How do you
So
escape politics? It's all
I don't
around you.
know. I don't think you can at this
When
point.
it's the very weather, and it's our country's about to celebrate its 250th birthday, and it's like there's a bunch of highs about the aspirations of the United States, and there's a bunch of lows about the actual shit that's happened, so.
Hmm.
And I feel like games ought to charge into that, right? Like, um,
Yeah, for
there's
sure.
a new Robert Eggers movie coming out. Have you seen The Witch and Nosferatu?
I saw some of. I didn't watch The Witch, but I watched the beginning of Nosferatu and I fell asleep. So, I mean,
Oh my
I
God, dude.
love the idea of it, and I want to watch it, but it's one that I put on late at night, and I
Yeah.
never finished
The
it.
Witch is brilliant. It took me a long time to come around to it because I'm kind of a wimp about horror movies.
Hmm.
But The Lighthouse was actually the one by him that lit me up, so to speak.
Is that the
The
Robert Pattinson and
Willem
William Dafoe?
Dafoe. It's
Willem
just
Dafoe.
it's just a tour de force of acting and cinematography and writing. It's so good, man. But
Hmm.
there's one called Werewolf that's coming, I think, and
Yeah.
the focus is like very historically accurate Middle Ages stuff, drawing
Oh,
from
cool.
what was going on at the time and how people made their living and how families functioned. And man, it looks harrowing, and it's that's the word of the day, harrowing.
Hey, that's a
um,
good word.
Yeah. But anyway, I just, you talk about creative direction, and some part of it is probably 50%, or I don't know, maybe it breaks into thirds or something, but it's like, just who are you and what have you grown up on and what are your tastes, the
Hmm.
music and the film and the political movements of your time and all that, that give you kind of an instinct when someone goes, I have an idea for the game. What if we did this? And you're like, that fits. That's great. Let's go with that. Or no, hold on. That doesn't quite fit the filters or whatever. And the other half of it probably is research, right? Like for
Hmm.
Dishonored, man, we did so much research. We read Limehouse Nights and some other uh, things about projects in England, and like some things about the years of the plague and how orphans survived it before we had social um, infrastructure to take care of children starving. Like,
Yeah.
there was a point in time in London where you had toddlers on the street starving, and
Okay.
so the older kids would make gangs, but the little kids they would be reduced to things like sifting through the mud where the sewer system dumped out into the Thames, hoping
Hmm.
to find a bit of a broken decorative comb or a ring or a coin or something they could sell for food that day or whatever. And
Hmm.
they didn't last long because they would cut their feet up and get diseases, and um, but they called them mudlarks. And I remember reading that and just being like, holy shit. And it's like, the more you look into history, the more you realize, oh, this is why we have the kind of progressive society that we have, where we try to take care of the very old and the very young and the people who are unfortunately sick or afflicted by something.
Mm,
Everyone benefits when the vulnerable are given a lift. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, all you end up with is a bunch of already privileged people getting even increasingly more powerful. You know, it's snowball effect,
yeah.
legacy system. But anyway, that kind of research, like where you look into like, and you just constantly learn crazy things. Like I remember reading like they kept detailed records of the cause of death in
Uh-huh.
London at different years, right? And so we went back through and we read that like one year, like in the 1800s or 1700s or whatever, like there were like I don't know 15,000 people that died in London one year, or maybe it was 1,500, but it was a big number, right? That died, and the cause was listed as teeth. Like they just had like a tooth infection and it killed them or something, right? And
Yeah.
so and we would read about like before building codes where you had to go through like modern building codes. People complain about it, like oh this they issued another building code and the light sockets have to be this way now. Well, if they don't,
Yeah.
they cause fires, man. But anyway, before all that, when the family, which often didn't have birth control, would have that ninth kid or the eighth kid and they didn't fit in the apartment building or the house, the dad and the oldest son would like go out to one of the bedrooms, go out through the window and start building like another room on the edge. And they said that some years you could just stand there and hear all across London collapses. Like
Oh
a
God.
couple of times a week, you would just hear like a bunch of carpentry collapse because people didn't know what the fuck they were doing, you know?
Right.
And it's just like you can't actually look into real history without being like, oh, all the things we do, all the regulations we do them because previously companies were like, we can save some money by dumping all this raw sewage into the drinking supply, into the river.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of it, and like, oh, that's why we made that illegal because that makes a bunch of people sick
Yeah.
or whatever, like, anyway,
Yeah, it's worth looking at and worth considering what the fallout is of your decisions.
yeah.
Um, um, well,
None of this has to do with games except
no, it
at a
does.
very
It's
high level.
yeah, no, it definitely does because you are informed by those things, and anybody who was on the project probably also investigated those topics, and that's what informed the direction of the game. So that's what I want to know about.
Well,
Um,
at the same time, you're constantly working with a large team, and there are people that are just like, I like this old game, and I want the new game to be like that game for new people, like the game was
mhm,
for me, right? So in some sense, Dishonored was an homage to Thief, which
right.
we all love a lot. But early on Dishonored, we talked to Doug Church, who was one of the leads at Looking Glass, and certainly a mentor and a practically a hero to me and Raphael.
Yeah.
And
He
he
was on
said,
System Shock, right? Or I
System
guess
Shock, Underworld, Thief, a bunch of stuff during that time. British Open
okay.
Golf, Flight Unlimited, Terra Nova. They
Mhm.
made some crazy cool games in a run of time that I think is like for people like me is almost unmatched. Like just
Yeah.
Underworld, Underworld 2, and System Shock, and it's crazy. Thief, just those three games, Underworld, Thief, and System Shock, are just like mind-blowingly great and innovative. But
Mhm.
we talked to him early on and said, this is the kind of thing we're doing. What would you do different? And he was like, Thief is based around going slow, and you benefit by going slow. And I think if I had to do it again, I would try to let the player move fast. So it really got into our thinking that, like, okay, only a tiny subset of people really like creeping along slow or waiting for 5 minutes for a guard to pass or whatever.
Mhm.
And so we have to get that timing differently. But there are people on your team that are just wanting to make something that they love before they want to make a version of that. And then there are people that are like, I just want to make a badass action film. I want it to feel like John Wick or whatever.
Yeah.
And so and you share the space with all those people, and I'm not simple politically either. Like I know things are nuanced, and there's reasons why we do some of the counter stuff we do. It's not a popular opinion, but like
Hmm.
Sometimes the opposition has a good point about some things, not fascism for sure, but some things, right?
Right.
Um, and so you're mixing all that together, and you're using your taste and your co-director's tastes, and also the research you've done, and then you're also just like giving into the players some, like what works
Yeah.
when people play our game. What do they rage about? What do they love? Then you're like leaning into that and trying to enhance that, like and sometimes the difference between a good game and a great game just comes down to if you had that extra 3 or 6 months to look over and over at the lists of things in your game that are like, hey, what's the 10 worst things in our game today? And what
Hmm.
are the 10 things that are the best? Like, let's make sure the 10 things that are the best are as good as they can be, but at some point it's diminishing returns. Like once bend time and blink and neck stabbing and sneaking and possessing a rat and all that stuff in Dishonored that people talk about and love, the dialogue so brilliantly written by a bunch of different people, Terry
Attention.
Brosius, Austin Grossman,
Solitary
me,
Ring is
Ricardo,
off
other people on
limits
the
to
team.
maintenance crews.
And I hope I'm
Thanks
not
for the
leaving
company,
somebody out,
Flying
somebody major.
Officer of
But
the
like,
Law.
but once the dialogue is recorded and people like it, and you've cut as much as you can cut, then you're left with this like, this game would be great, but I keep feeling like I'm being punched in the throat every time I play it by this one thing. And so,
Yeah.
well, let's fix that one thing. And sometimes it's as simple as like, well, I hop up on a table and I try to sneak down the table and I'm knocking plates and glasses and shit around. And so we were like, well, you have to have collision or you can't bump into things or you can't. So what if we gave Corvo a collision cylinder that starts, you know, 6 inches off the ground for with regard to like interactive objects like bottles and stuff, or a
Hmm.
foot off the ground. So he has like effectively like a body capsule that can detect hits and stuff, but
Hmm.
in terms of knocking shit around, he has a different collision. And that way,
Yeah.
when you jump up on the table and you creep down the table, you don't even think like, I'm not knocking these plates around. I'm not knocking these bottles over. That's weird. I can pick up a bottle and throw it if I want, but immediately you feel sneakier, right? Like that
Yeah.
one fix by some programmer who was like looking at the problem and talking to me in rap about it, talking to Dinga and the other game designers about it. Seth Shane was like, uh, Seth Shane and Dinga Bakaba were doing a lot of game tuning in Lyon and Austin on Dishonored. And, once you talk to them about this problem, it's like definitely on everybody's top 10 list of things that suck. I feel clumsy knocking shit around. And you fix
Yeah.
that one thing, takes somebody a few days to do it and debug it, and suddenly that drops off the list. And if you
Yeah.
keep knocking shit off that list, then you're left with only the good things theoretically, right? So,
Yeah. I think Raph said it in one of your playthroughs recently, where he mentioned that you played around with the idea of having the body be visible early on, but then ditched that idea at some point just because it was like you start to notice when the feet are slipping and it doesn't like
yeah,
you forget about it after the first few minutes if
it's
you're not.
fascinating how every medium goes through trends as people explore ideas.
Hmm.
Like you could probably cite 10 of these from music easily. But in games right now, you'll notice that like games come out where there's no front end menu. You're just like,
Hmm.
there's a scene and you're standing in the scene. And when you start moving, the scene comes to life. The AI is not suspended anymore and you just move through the world. And that's a new trend. And it's actually kind of pleasant to not have that heavy front end new game, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Not to have some sort of like loading screen basically, but instead just have like, I'm in wherever I was last time, that's where I'm standing.
Hmm.
But those trends come and go, and Raph and I always joke because like some of them are very alluring, and then you go down the path and you realize it's not a great path. Like
Hmm.
the HUDless game, there are probably counterexamples, and somebody's going to nail that someday. But like every time we've tried to make a game with zero on-screen
Yeah.
HUD UI elements, you just end up with like, but players are frustrated because they don't know when they're crouching. They forget that they're
Yeah.
crouched. And like, why am I moving slow, dude? Give me some indication that I'm crouched. That's
Yeah.
it's just you'd think that they could tell by the how low or how high I am, but sometimes they can't in first person. And so the HUDless thing was a trend for a while that we kind of abandoned. In that same way, and I think we tried it on Dishonored also, by the way, but in that same
Hmm.
way, what we call full body awareness, there were times when people were like, this is the future.
Hmm.
And like you could look at games, I don't know if Trespasser actually did it, but there were definitely games that tried full body awareness, and we tried it a couple of times. And it's just like, man, it is more realistic. You get good shadows out of it,
Hmm.
but like it's a pain in the ass, and it doesn't actually add that much because once people start playing the game, they kind of forget a lot of that stuff anyway, and they're just kind of like
Yeah.
in the world, right? And so it doesn't matter that they're a pair of arms and a camera, you know.
Yeah. I think that some of that, I don't know. I feel some of that when I play a third person game. Like, I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but like when there's too many animations, too many transition animations between an input and what you're
Mm.
trying to do, it's just like, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. Um, I prefer a more direct, like you press a button, something happens.
Well,
Um,
when people were talking about full body awareness for a while, this goes way back, but like picking up something, right? Like I
mhm,
go over to a table in Dishonored, there's a bottle, I pick it up, it's kind of in front of me, and then I throw it, and it flies through the world and crashes, and a guard hears it or whatever. But
mhm.
there was a time in games where people were like, well, the hand is here, and I've got to get the hand over the like, mouth of the bottle just right, and then close just right, and lift it. And if I swing it and hit the bottom of my keyboard, it breaks the bottom of of the glass or whatever. And it's just like, you know, but it's just like too cumbersome, really.
Yeah,
And anyway, yeah.
yeah, I feel that, and I prefer the way that it was handled in Dishonored.
Oh, but when people get that animation transition stuff right, even that's brilliant. Elden Ring is one of my favorite games of all time, and
Yeah.
I played it through twice, very, very meticulously, trying to find all the talismans and doing all the jails and all the
Hmm.
catacombs, all the heroes' graves and stuff like that. And then, like, probably 16 speed runs after that, with people just on the couch, like going with the same character because it gets harder, but you're fully kitted out, right? And
Yeah.
man, the way they handle animations and interrupts and
Hmm.
the way you just intuitively start to and if you're weighted down it all changes, like, man, it's just brilliant. And
I
that's
know.
because that's their specialty, and they're a team that's just invested in that for years and years, and it's that game was such a delight for me because it's a mix of the familiar. It feels like Western fantasy meets like an Eastern mindset, and
Hmm.
God, it was just like brilliant on so many levels, I thought.
Yeah.
Even though it breaks all the rules, like it has the most clunky UI I've ever seen. The narrative half the time doesn't make any sense, but that
Hmm.
actually adds to its charm because it's like mysterious.
Yeah. You kind of have
All
to.
the rules like you would have applied before, you kind of throw them out, But
Yeah, I guess that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about because I know that you're a big Elden Ring fan. Does that relate in any way to your appreciation for D&D and like RPG stuff on that level? Or
yeah, I guess like everybody, I'm a fan of different genre settings or whatever, and it's like this kind of collective hodgepodge of the past when horses and swords and stuff were important.
yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is about that. Um, but yes, I play a lot of D&D. I always have. I'm wearing a beholder shirt, an undead
Mhm.
beholder shirt today. Um, and I'm actually working on a monster book for 5e D&D monsters that I hope is out soon because it's been taking years. Um, and And I love it when somebody does a take on that is both compelling and feels true to what I love about it. Exploration, ruins, like
Mhm.
the hint that ancient layers of society, magic and sacrifice and all of that stuff. But when somebody mixes it with something that makes it fresh again,
Hmm.
like the weird mythology of Elden Ring, where Marika split herself into male and female parts, and then had children with herself, and as a result, they're all cursed, and
Yeah.
that stuff is just like. And then there's a touch of Christianity thrown in there, like grace and all this kind of stuff. It's just like
Hmm.
it's so compelling and so fresh, and at the same time, it's just like exploring another dungeon, like riding your
Yeah.
horse and leveling up, and so it's like the same thing I love, but given a new life, basically.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting there. Like you could distill it down to it's a video game and it feels like a video game, and that's something too that I also appreciate a great deal about some of the other games that you've worked on. Um, I tried to articulate it in one of my other interviews with Steve Lee, level
He's a,
designer on Dishonored 2.
he's a great guy and super talented. I think he did actually work on BioShock 2, and
Okay.
he worked with us on Dishonored 2, and if you're a level designer or a game developer at all, Steve has a series of videos that you should look up and watch. He's
Yeah,
very good.
most definitely. And that's how I came to know who you were, honestly,
Oh, okay.
through
Yeah.
him. Like after I played Dishonored 1 and 2, I was like, I got to know more about what makes this game or this series so special. And I
But
found his, what's that?
I cut you off. You were saying you were trying to articulate something in an interview with him, and I was curious what you were. I didn't
Oh,
mean to
right.
cut you off.
No, it's fine. So one thing I asked him was like, it's a kind of hard for me to pin it down, but Dishonored feels it's very deep and very like story rich. The world is very you know, well thought out and sophisticated, but it also has like this layer, and this kind of ties into something I've been hearing you talk about. But it's got this layer that just feels fun and like it's very gamey. It's a gamey ass game. Like it just feels like a video game. And you said something about the potions, like you've got the blue mana and the red health potion, and it's very familiar and it just feels intuitive. And I don't know, can you describe kind of your approach to making it feel like a video game, but also have that depth?
Yeah, that's a funny one because I remember Raph and I talking about that, and kind of like, we would have these moments. We shared an office for years, and it
Hmm.
was an old conference room with the glass window looking out at the other desk, so we could sit in there, and sometimes we'd be laughing about shit, and sometimes we'd be arguing pretty fiercely about stuff. But most of the time, we were just shooting ideas back and forth, or playing the game and talking and observing each other.
Hmm.
And it's where a lot of great stuff that we contributed, like, uh, the non-lethal takedown of all the assassination targets was born on a yellow sticky in a conversation in that room, and
Hmm.
sometimes we'd look up and people on the team were all watching us through the window, like because we had just been yelling or something, or laughing too hard or whatever.
Hmm.
But but I remember it was one of those moments where we're looking at it, and we're like, surely not the cliche of the red and blue potion, and yet it was like, well, but
Tuesday,
people instantly
Holy Magic.
understand that, and
And
there's
now,
so much
these
obscure weird
forces will
shit in this
swiftly
game with
burn.
the outsider and bone charms and ruins and whales that might be psychic and the void and witches and like government shit. There's so much weird stuff in the game that we need some grounding touchstones, right? And so we need a way to increase your health. We need a way to increase to control, to restrict your use of magic powers, because otherwise you just be blinking and possessing constantly,
Right.
And we talked about regenerative health models, like where the health comes back over time. We don't like that. Yeah, I know it's
Hmm.
old school, but it feels more intentional to manage your potion count and to
Yeah.
remember where the potions are. Like, hey, I'm carrying the max I can right now, but there's one on the table there. I can either top off my health and pick that one up, Or I'm
Mm-hmm.
at full health, so I don't do that. I'm going to explore the level and then come back to
And then
that
come
spot when
back.
I'm wounded. And so it just facilitates more decision making. Who cares if it's old school or not, you know? But
Yeah.
then on top of that, for the depth, we went crazy. We were like, okay, there's two rival natural philosophers or scientists in town that are, and even using terms like natural philosophy instead of science before people were really using the word science, you know, it gives it a layered feel, and it's a little it's based in research, you know. And so
Yeah.
they're two rival people, the same way Edison and Tesla were rivals, you know, like at a different time, of course. But this is pseudo 1850s, and so we have Piero and Sokolov, and they are trying to make a cure for the plague. And so they have I don't remember what they were called at this point, but Sokolov's elixir or Piero's remedy or whatever. And we had posters for them, and we had guards talking about them, and we had people talking about how that was being rationed by the government, meaning the government's friends were getting it and the poor people weren't, so they were all succumbing to the plague. And but in any case, like that was like, and then there, early on, I mean, like some things happened very late in a production that changed the game, right? Like you're escaping from prison, Coleridge Prison, and as you're going through the sewer tunnels, we put two dead bodies, a man and a woman, and we put
Mm-hmm.
a note, and there's a hole there, I think, where you look out into the Rennhaven River. And we put a note that, like, hey, we're both showing signs of the plague, but we're in love, and we only have one elixir, and we're very poor, and the guards are being draconian. So instead of one of us drinking it or the other, I think we're just going to sit here and watch the river. And then they died, and you pick up the potion and drink it, of course, you know, because like
Yeah.
that's the player's role, is to loot everything. But that little
Yeah.
touch, like that's the kind of thing where like you just keep layering and layering, and you take it seriously. You make it a meaningful part of your world. And so even something as simple as red and blue potions, which we all know because Diablo is so brilliant as an action RPG, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's a familiar touchstone for the player. So it was kind of like that groaning moment being Raph, where like, are we going to do this cliche? And it's like, yeah, this will actually help the player, and it will achieve the gameplay we wanted, you know. And
Yeah.
we discussed, should we make one gold and one purple or something, but it was like, you know what, blue and red is the classic, you know. So let's go.
Yeah. I think that's one of the elements of Dishonored that kind of, I don't know, it's almost like comfort food. It just
Hmm.
makes it feel like a video game to me. And I don't
Yeah,
know if go ahead.
there was a designer, and it maybe I'm going to get this wrong. I think he was a British guy who moved to New York and worked in ad agencies and stuff, maybe in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Raymond Lowey, and I think I get that name right. And like he, a lot of the things you've seen, like the very cool 50s style fridge with the rounded front, or the train that
Yeah.
went from like if you imagine a locomotive in a Western movie, it has the stack and the big nose, but later they became these
Mm-hmm.
sleek, like Art Deco looking things, you know, like
Yeah.
so he had this concept. I think it was called Maya, most advanced yet acceptable. And so
Uh-huh.
what he meant was, if you people want the most advanced modern fridge they can get, but they don't want something too weird. They want something kind of like their old fridge. It still has to
Mm-hmm.
be acceptable or recognizable as a fridge. And I think that was a brilliant idea, because you could turn everything on its head in a video game and do everything different. But if you
Mm-hmm.
did, you'd be making a very innovative, avant garde indie game for a tiny group of people. And if you're
Yeah.
spending a lot of money to make your video game, you need to reach a wider audience. So if you're going to do strange things and different things and hard things, like getting people to figure out our possession in Dishonored, like where you don't just take the mind of the person. We had done that before in Deus Ex games. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could see JC Denton crouching in the background or whatever. Actually, I guess it was the follow up character um, in Invisible War. He could like enter computers or robots, and you could walk the robot around and see your body crouched and concentrating, like you're remote controlling that camera or that turret or that robot. But like
Yeah.
for Dishonored, we wanted to literally like bodily go into the other person, so it works like disguise. So I can
Yeah.
walk around as a maid. I can walk through the wall of light or an arc pylon or whatever. I can walk past it, and And so you're doing strange things. You're trying to get people to um, take the risk of doing something weird and learning it. You also
Hmm.
have to extend a hand to them. Don't worry, this is going to be somewhat familiar, or else you lose too many people, I think. So it all depends on your budget and your goals and how avant-garde you want to be. But it's like, in our case, we wanted comfort and innovation together, I guess. That was like kind of a high
Yeah.
level concept.
Yeah. And I guess how does that tie into what the comment I was referring to a minute ago? Um, I keep hearing you refer to the adventure game layer in
Hmm.
in immersive sims. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and what
Yeah.
classifies as or what qualifies as something that was on the adventure game layer?
Yeah, we do things like action layer for jumping and climbing and the player package. What's it like to do a muscle up on the roof and get up on the roof or whatever, like, and the combat layer, fighting, and the stealth layer. We talk about all these different systems. And a lot of it, like physics, you just throw a bottle and it breaks and the guard hears it. That's all simulated, right?
Right.
But adventure game layer for us meant there is a one-off object here that has a purpose. Like a good example might be the sort of lazy Susan caddy for drinks
Mm-hmm.
in Dishonored's High Overseer mission, where you go to the office of the High Overseer and Campbell is about to poison Callista's uncle, Captain Kurnow,
Yeah.
and you can sneak up to that and reverse the cups or poison both of them or take all the poison away or break the whole thing and then hide under the table and watch what happens. And
Mm-hmm.
then the simulation takes over and they come out and they have scripted lines for, that's strange. You should be feeling weird right now. Or Campbell realizes he's accidentally drank the poison. But
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely like a one-off we did for that room, and it feels like a little adventure game puzzle where you could like, you know, uh, put the coal in the bucket and it makes it heavy and it
Yeah.
raises something or whatever. It's like that kind of thing.
Okay. That's cool. I definitely am fond of the idea of that, and um, I think that is probably um, one of those elements that you don't necessarily realize is so prevalent in an immersive sim, but
I think
it
it's
is.
part of the secret sauce, right? Because
Yeah.
there's definitely first person combat or exploration. There's looting and there's like finding multiple pathways to things. There's the atmospherics. There's toying with the AI if there's any kind of perception, awareness, stealth kind of model. There's playing around with physics. There's the narrative, of course, talking to people or listening to them. But this other layer of like, you know, uh, what if, the painting on the wall has a clue in it? Or what if, like you can switch around the poison cup or whatever, this kind of thing is it is like one of the things people remember, and you're constantly trying to get the player to shift gears, right? Like one minute I'm
Yeah.
fighting, then I'm sneaking, then I'm reading or listening, but then I'm like thinking about this little adventure game puzzle or whatever, and that's very pleasurable, I think, for people to switch like that, to not do the same thing over and over.
I want to say, of all the things that video games can be, for me, sometimes it all comes together in this way. It resolves into this way where no one's fucking with you. You have enough runway. You have the right team around you, and it's the right ratio of stable technology, but like really good art, good sound, gameplay that is interesting, and narrative that is interesting, all together, just like this overlapping thing.
Hmm.
And I wasn't a creative lead or anything like that on System Shock. Again, I was for 10 months. I was the lead tester of the floppy and the CD version. That's why it was so long. I
Hmm.
remember we worked for a long time on the floppy disk version. It didn't have voice; it was all text.
Oh,
And then the
cool.
team sent us the first build with the voices, and we heard Showdan's voice for the first time.
Humanity is on the verge of a new era. I, Shodan, am its new god.
And all the audio logs where people are yelling and people are shooting in the background. It was like life changing for me. It was like the White Album, you know. It was like just like. Um, but what I was gonna say is like that project, being around those guys on fire working on that project, and
Mhm.
then like doing Deus Ex. I mean, even along the way, games that were not as well received or not as big, like Fireteam, like the fact that we shipped a game with voice before other people did that, like it was
That's
cool
awesome.
hearing the other players yell and be frustrated. This is everyone does this all day playing Tarkov or whatever now, right?
Yeah.
But like that was a big deal. The technology was so new. We didn't even really have broadband in most places yet, and it was way too early to be trying that. But all I was going to say is like, you know, System Shock, Deus Ex, Dishonored, Dishonored 2. There are these moments where just the right people are there and you have the right vacuum around you. Nobody's pressuring you to put in a loot box or whatever,
Hmm.
or add NFTs or some stupid shit like that. And and it just feels so good to me. It just feels like I'm a dungeon master or one of, you know, 100 dungeon masters on this team, and we're making something for our millions of players.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. You know, it's been so good.
So part of the interest here for me is preserving like the way people talented people actually make games. Um, protecting that institutional knowledge that is so
Yeah,
threatened when these big mass layoffs happen and teams
dude.
get dispersed.
You know, I talk about that all the time. How I don't know. I don't know everything, right? I haven't been in every field or whatever, but I suspect that if you wanted to go be a pilot, you would take some classes in aeronautics and physics and the mechanical
Hmm.
functional planes. You would spend some time in the simulators. You would finally get to fly on your own after you understood enough things about stall and wind currents and whatever else, right? Fuel consumption. Um,
Hmm.
and then you would sit with somebody else who sat beside you and they would, you know, okay, pull back on the stick or whatever. And
Right.
then like there's probably manuals. There's probably like how to fly a plane A through Z, like by people that did it for 40 years or something, you know, commercial pilots who also flew planes in war or something. In my experience, there's just not really the book that is like how to make games. And there's some great books out there, like Eric Zimmerman
Hmm.
wrote a great book with some other people. Frank Lance wrote some beautiful stuff. There's all
Yeah.
the practical things about animation or whatever, but like it changes so fast. There really isn't that manual. It is a bunch of institutional knowledge. I don't think people realize that when you shut down a studio, um, some people are just like, I'm out. I'm going to go work at
Hmm.
some other place. I'm not going to make, like, just
Yeah.
so I say it, I plan on continuing to make video games. I love video games, but like, will I be able to? I don't know. We'll find out. It is hard to put words into how this is not a normal job. And I think that's
Hmm.
probably the part that the money people don't understand. Like, you know,
Yeah. The people that tend to gravitate toward the game development industry are typically passionate people that enjoy what like they want to experience the art of making the thing that they love playing with. And so it's like, I don't know, it's not like you're going to count beans or whatever.
yeah, I've talked probably too much about how my early life was not ideal. You know, my mom OD'd in front of me when I was 6. My dad was violent. He committed suicide. I told that story till
Hmm.
I feel a little obnoxious talking about it at all.
Oh.
But it's like trying to connect with people and say like, hey, my dad was a welder at a chemical plant. I grew up on the Texas Gulf Coast. Like I didn't go to
Hmm.
college, you know, or I didn't finish college, you know. And so this was all very hard to get into for me. But that
Hmm.
said, honestly, at a certain point, it kind of became charmed, and I almost feel guilty because my life has been really great. There have been struggles, as you've seen, and my
Oh
life's
yeah.
been burned down by bad games, like, you know, bad mistakes on my part or whatever, the organization several times. But like enough has gone well to keep me going. And I'll just say that, like, you know, I've worked with an executive who was our CEO who came out of Playboy magazine. I've worked with somebody who came out of the snack cake company, Dolly Madison or whatever. And it's just like,
Mhm.
man, it's pretty interchangeable at that level. And they think,
Yeah.
right? If you come in, you cut the things that are losing, you put more pressure on the things that are winning. Like that is short term thinking, and like it is not a healthy ecosystem, and it won't last. But whatever, I guess it's how you pump and dump a snack cake company or whatever. But it's not.
Hmm.
It's like the video game. Like I stop and I think about people. I've mentioned Dinga and people like that. Um, who I loved working with, and Rafael Colantonio, Sebastian Maton, people like that. Um, but like to bring it closer to home, like I think about how lucky I've been. I've met a lot of people just like coming out of college and they were on
Hmm.
fire, and they liked what we were doing. So, one of my best friends in this world is Ricardo Bear, who worked on Prey and Dishonored and Deus Ex, and brilliantly worked on the Dishonored DLC, Knife of Dunwall, Brigmore Witches. Just a great guy.
Oh yeah.
You said game people are passionate. Like, man, he went to school and he has, I think, I could be, I'm probably misquoting him the same way people give me credit for the wrong games or whatever. But like, I think he
Right.
has a computer science degree and a philosophy degree. And
Oh
also
wow.
he's written a series of fantasy novels, right? So, and we've worked together off and on for many, many years since like 1998 or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And we've played D&D together that entire time as well. And so
That's
it's
so
like,
awesome.
when something like this happens, it's not like, cog A has to like move to a new machine while cog B goes and does this other thing. There's like powerful relationships, man.
Yeah.
um yeah, anyway, there it's just like it's almost impossible, it's almost laughable to try to sum up how you feel about an industry that is so frustrating, right? It's
I know.
simultaneously art and technology that's very innovative and cutting edge. So people are very excited to be working on a new system. But they're also kind of like massaging the narrative and creating new characters.
Visitor. I present the lost sister of Jessamine Caldwin. Delilah Caldwin.
Impossible.
I'm here to relieve you of your crown.
But someone yanked the rug from under your feet. You've lost your throne and your father.
The outsider preys on weakness. A fear that grips your throat, bends your spine, leaving only blood and death in his wake. Anyway, fun interview. One left.
I know you've got to go soon, but before you jet, I just wanted to say I've noticed that you're very generous with giving people credit where credit is due, and you're always quick to give to shed light on talented people in the industry. And I know
And
when
also to say, I didn't work on that. Please stop giving me credit for that game.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no, but it's just I think um, it's been so nice to get to know you, and I appreciate all the time you've spent chatting with me on various topics and whatnot. But
Yeah, and
it's
people
been really
comment
cool.
on that a lot. I'm not patting myself on the back here, but I hear that a lot. And I think if you had caught me when I was in my 20s, when I was afraid of not getting control enough or not enough credit or not making my
Hmm.
mark enough, I probably would have been, I was probably a less pleasant person, thinking
Hmm.
back. Um, Not that I'm perfect now, by the way, but I just want to say that part of that is selfish, man, because the the mentoring and the bonding and making friends with people, um, it hasn't always paid off. Sometimes it's burned me, but like generally speaking, I end up learning so much from somebody, or I end up best friends for decades, or we end up collaborating together, and and we make something together better than I would have been able to make on my own. Um, and it's just like in an industry that is this volatile and this heartbreaking and with no manual. It is
Hmm.
absolutely necessary that people have their networks. Um, some people some industries heavily rely on like unions and stuff, and that's got its place and that's important. But I would say your network of people that know you well and trust you and call you out when you do something bad, like that network is far more important in an industry like this, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so many developers I know are very generous. Like we're working with this guy right now who told me on the side, like, hey, I hope I can still do X, Y, and Z, like side projects or contracts or whatever, because I mentor a lot of people and I have friends that are under the gun and they need and my skills, and I will just jump in for a week and help them with something, and it pushes them over the line. And
Hmm.
I was just like, God, you're our guy. That is beautiful to hear, because I very much believe in that,
Yeah.
whatever you're working on, so. And I'm still working on my D&D monster book, that
Oh
I
yeah.
hope is going to come out this year. And again, without people playtesting it or reading the ideas or proofreading, or then, that would be very difficult to do too, so,
Yeah.
um, it's just like creative work. I think it's all about community. Sometimes it's easy to watch. I guess he's a creep, so it's maybe I shouldn't mention his movies or something. But like, I'm not a huge Woody Allen fan, but like, Midnight in Paris has at
Mhm.
least a message in it that I really like, which is like the main character is in love with the 20s and Hemingway and Gertrude Stein and her lover. I can't remember her name. They had the writing salon together, and all these other people would come in and out of their orbit. And and so I was born out of time. I wish I was in that place. And sometimes I fall prey to that. Like, I wish
Mhm.
I had been like, 25 in 1970 or something, because man, looking back on Bowie and,
Yeah.
uh, even like Susie and the Banshees and Patti Smith and the birth of the Cure a few years later, Led Zeppelin, all that shit, the Almost Famous story that,
Yeah.
uh, that, you can get from that time period or whatever. It's like modern times often feel so disappointing because there's not that romance, right?
Mhm.
The creative gatherings, everyone's isolated and so much is remote, and people don't talk to their neighbors sometimes. Even, they don't gather in public spaces the same way. They don't have the same civic organizations or whatever.
Yeah.
And I I try to do as much of that as I can, but like, I don't always do like things like the IGDA. I'm not a huge fan of that. Like, maybe I should be. There are indie meetups that sometimes are happening in Austin, and then something will kill it for a while, and it's not happening. Those things are pretty important. And you look at culture. You look at cities like LA. There's like a strong component of that. There were Montreal, strong component. When I was in Lyon, there were amazing meetups, and for me, it's like I have my life, my life with the people around me, the people that love me, my friends. I have my professional life. I have my creative side projects. I go to CrossFit a few times a week, and I know it's a cult community, as people say, but it's like I rely on that heavily because those people are so dear to me, and I've known many of them for years, since 2017. I uh, I go to dinner and hang out with people that I used to work with years ago. I play D&D with people I've known for 20 or 30 years. And it's like, without that sort of touch grass human moment, where you bond with the people around you.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish more of that was, you know, like the sort of
Readily
promise.
available.
Yeah, readily available. And also the promise of, like, the 1920s writing salon or whatever, like
Mhm.
it's all in retrospect, and it's not true. That's the whole point of the movie, is the people in the 20s wish that they could go back to the Belle
Mhm.
Epic or whatever, in an earlier age that they romanticized or they idealized. So I think sometimes when the world seems dystopic, it's actually the world's always scary. The world's always got problems. It always has volatility. Um,
Mhm.
Climate change might be the game changer. It might be the big difference, actually. But we've always had war. We've always had downturns and golden ages or roaring decades or whatever, right? So,
Yeah.
but I guess the point, if there is one in all of that, is that your connection to other creative people and just sharing your passion about the idea that you've got and hearing them reflect back to you, like what's cool about it to them, that is the stuff, man. And even if, I'd like to think that even if I had never worked on anything that anyone gave a shit about, like if I had that, I would keep going,
Yeah.
That's the part that, when the layoffs come or when your game doesn't do very well or whatever, you can almost always fall back on the people that you work with and the meaningful connections that you have with them, if the culture is right at the company, so
Yeah.
anyway, I've enjoyed this. I gotta go, but if you want to do a part 3, if we need to do a part 3, let me know. I'm always available. So
Yeah. I think we'll probably be okay, but I might take you up on that. But yeah.
or we can do a sequel at some point after you've had time to digest
Yeah, maybe
it.
like maybe a follow up later
Yeah.
on. Well, Harvey, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be in touch.
All right, see you soon. Bye.
All right, see ya. Thank you for watching, and thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it more than you know. And if you haven't already, head on over to Patreon and check out what I'm offering as just a small thank you for your support. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.